When Khalil Al-Mansouri walked into the small wellness center in Cape Town, nobody expected the billionaire oil executive to single out Safiya, a quiet Somali refugee who had been working there for barely 6 months. What he whispered to her that Tuesday evening would leave everyone speechless. $1 million, one night, but not for what you think. What Safiya discovered about this man's hidden truth would shatter everything she thought she knew about wealth, power, and the depths of human desperation. Because sometimes the richest people in the world are the poorest in the ways that matter most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Ocean View Wellness Center sat tucked between a vintage bookshop and a coffee roastery on Long Street, its modest glass frontage barely noticeable among Cape Town's bustling afternoon crowd. Inside, the scent of eucalyptus oil mingled with soft instrumental music, creating a sanctuary that felt worlds away from the city's chaos just beyond the door. Safiya Osman pressed her palms against the small of her back, stretching muscles that had been working since sunrise. 6 clients today, each carrying their own invisible burdens that somehow transferred into the knots beneath her fingertips. She had learned to read stories in shoulder tension, to understand grief in the way someone's breathing changed when gentle pressure found exactly the right spot. At 28, Safiya had already lived several lifetimes. The journey from Mogadishu to Cape Town had been carved from desperation and hope in equal measure. Her English was still careful, deliberate, but her hands spoke a universal language that needed no translation. In the 18 months since she'd arrived with nothing but a battered suitcase and her mother's prayer beads, she had built something resembling a life. The wellness center's owner, Mrs. Chun, had taken a chance on her despite the lack of formal certifications. "Your touch is healing," the elderly woman had said simply after Safiya's trial session. "That cannot be taught in schools." Now, as the late afternoon sun slanted through the treatment room windows, Safiya was preparing for her final client. When the front door chimed, she glanced toward the reception area and froze. The man who entered didn't belong in their humble space. Everything about him screamed wealth, from the way his charcoal suit fit perfectly across his shoulders to the subtle gleam of his Swiss watch. But it wasn't his expensive appearance that made everyone stop and stare. It was the way he moved, with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to having the world rearrange itself around his presence. He was tall, perhaps in his early 40s, with olive skin and graying temples that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. His dark eyes swept the room with the calculating gaze of a man who missed nothing. Yet there was something else there, a heaviness that designer clothes couldn't hide. "Good afternoon," he said to Maya, the young receptionist whose voice suddenly became very small. "I don't have an appointment." His accent carried the refined cadence of someone educated in London, but underneath lay the deeper rhythms of somewhere else, Lebanon, perhaps, or Jordan. Maya fumbled with the appointment book, her usual composure dissolving under his direct gaze. "We're quite booked today, sir." "Perhaps tomorrow. I'm looking for someone specific," he interrupted gently. "A woman named Safiya Osman. I was told she works here." Safiya's blood turned cold. She stepped back instinctively, pressing herself against the treatment room doorframe. How did this stranger know her name? She had been so careful, so invisible. The fear that had become her constant companion during those first months in Cape Town came flooding back. The terror that somehow, despite all the distance and time, her past had found her. Mrs. Chen emerged from her office, drawn by the unusual tension in the air. She was a small woman, but her presence commanded respect. "Sir, our therapists don't take personal appointments. If you'd like to book a session, Mrs. Chen, isn't it?" The man's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "My name is Khalil Al-Mansouri. Perhaps you've heard of Mansouri Energy Holdings. The name hit the room like a physical force. Even Safiya, who paid little attention to business news, recognized it. Mansouri Energy was one of the largest oil and gas companies in the Middle East, with operations spanning from Dubai to London. The man standing before them was worth billions. Mrs. Shen's demeanor shifted subtly. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, of course. How can we help you?" Khalil's eyes found Safiya across the room. For a moment they simply looked at each other, and she felt an odd recognition stir, not of his face, but of something deeper. The exhaustion in his eyes, perhaps. The way he held himself like a man carrying invisible weight. "Miss Osman," he said directly to her, ignoring everyone else in the room. "I need to speak with you." Safiya's throat felt dry. I don't know you, but I know you." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "I know what you did for my daughter." The words hit her like a physical blow. Daughter? Her mind raced backward through countless faces, countless sessions. She treated so many people, refugees like herself, wealthy locals, tourists passing through. How could she remember one child among so many? "I think there's been a mistake," she whispered. Khalil reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small photograph. He held it up so only she could see. The image showed a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, with dark curls and serious eyes. She was wearing a hospital gown and smiling, but it was the fragile smile of someone trying to be brave. "Layla," he said softly. "You treated her last year at the children's hospital. She was dying." The memory crashed into Safiya like a wave. The children's hospital where she volunteered twice a month, donating her services to young patients whose families couldn't afford private care. A little girl with leukemia, so thin and pale, but with eyes that held ancient wisdom. Safiya had worked with her for weeks, gentle massages to ease the pain from chemotherapy, simple touch to remind a sick child that she was still human, still worthy of tenderness. "Layla," Safiya breathed, and her heart broke all over again. "She died 3 months ago," Khalil continued, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. "But in her final weeks, she spoke of you constantly. The lady with the gentle hands who made the hurt go away, even when the medicine couldn't." Safiya felt tears prick her eyes. She remembered now the way Layla would light up when she arrived, how the little girl would chatter about her dreams of becoming a doctor, of helping other children feel better, how she had made Safiya promise to visit her when she got out of the hospital, never knowing that day would never come. "I'm so sorry," Safiya whispered. "She was such a beautiful child." "She was everything to me," Khalil said simply. "Her mother, my wife, died when Layla was 3. It was just the two of us against the world." The room had gone completely silent. Maya was crying quietly at the reception desk. Mrs. Chun had covered her mouth with her hand. Even the other therapists had emerged from their rooms, drawn by the weight of emotion filling the space. "You gave her something I couldn't," Khalil continued. "Peace, in those final weeks, after the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. You were the only person who could stop her pain. She would fall asleep during your sessions, really sleep, for the first time in months." Safiya's chest felt tight. "I barely did anything, just touched her shoulders, her hands. I sang her songs from my childhood." "You sang to her in Somali," Khalil said, and there was wonder in his voice. She didn't understand the words, but she said. The music sounded like her mother's voice. Like home. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and memory. Finally, Khalil spoke again, his voice so low that only Safiya could hear. "I need that peace," he said. "I need what you gave her. I'll pay you anything." "Sir, I don't understand. $1 million, he said, and the number fell into the silence like a stone into still water. "For one night. Not for anything improper. Just for what you gave Layla, the peace." The ability to sleep without dreaming of her face in that hospital bed. Safiya stared at him, her mind reeling. $1 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, meaningless. But the pain in his eyes was real, immediate, devastating. I can't take money for, please. The word came out broken, desperate. I haven't slept properly in 3 months. I've tried everything, doctors, therapists, medications, nothing works. But Layla ... she said your hands could chase away the darkness. I need to understand what she meant. Mrs. Chun stepped forward. Cautiously. Mr. Al-Mansouri, perhaps we could arrange a regular appointment. No, his voice was firm. Not here. Not with time limits and other people around. I need... He paused, struggling with words. I need to grieve properly. I need someone who understood her, who cared for her, to help me find a way to live with this. Safiya looked at this powerful man who had been reduced to begging for the simple human comfort of therapeutic touch. And she saw herself. She saw. The nights after her own parents had died in the bombing, when sleep brought only nightmares. She saw the desperate hunger for healing that went deeper than medicine could reach. Where? She asked quietly. My hotel, the Mount Nelson. I have a private suite. We can be alone, undisturbed. I'll pay you half now, half after. If you're uncomfortable at any point, you can leave. And if I say no... Khalil's shoulders sagged slightly. Then I'll respect that. But I'll also probably never sleep again. Safiya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision. In her mind, she could see Layla's face, hear her small voice asking why the medicine made her so tired. She had promised. That little girl, she would always be there when the pain got too strong. Maybe this was how she kept that promise. When? She asked. Tonight. I'll send a car for you at 8. The certainty in his voice suggested he had never doubted she would. Say yes. But as Safiya looked into his eyes, she realized this wasn't arrogance. It was the desperation of a man who had already lost everything that mattered, and who was willing to risk everything else for one night of peace. What she didn't know was that before the night was over, she would uncover a secret that would change not just Khalil's life, but her own and the lives of countless others who had been waiting in the shadows for someone brave enough to shine a light into the darkness, preparing. And narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Mount Nelson Hotel rose from the heart of Cape Town like a pink colonial jewel, its grand facade illuminated against the darkening sky. Safiya pressed her face to the window of the black Mercedes that had arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, watching the opulent building grow larger as they approached. She had passed this hotel countless times during her walks through the city, but never imagined she would step inside its legendary halls. The driver, a silent man, in an immaculate uniform, hadn't spoken during the 20-minute journey from her small flat and observatory. Safiya was grateful for the quiet. It gave her time to question every aspect of the decision that had brought her here. After Khalil had left the wellness center that afternoon, the space had erupted in whispered conversations and concerned glances. Mrs. Chun had pulled her aside immediately. Safiya, dear, you don't have to do this, the older woman had said, her voice heavy with worry. I know you need money, but there are other ways. It's not about the money. Safiya had replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. That little girl, I remember her now. She used to draw pictures of birds during our sessions. They reminded her of freedom. Mrs. Chun's expression had softened. You have a good heart, but powerful men. Sometimes they take more than they pay for. The warning echoed in Safiya's mind now as the Mercedes glided through the hotel's ornate gates. She clutched her small bag tighter, feeling the weight of the essential oils and clean linen she had packed. Whatever happened tonight, she would maintain her professionalism. She was a healer, not whatever Mrs. Chun feared she might become. The hotel's lobby was a study in old-world elegance: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and fresh white lily arranged in massive vases. Well-dressed guests moved through the space with the casual confidence of people accustomed to luxury. Safiya felt every eye turned toward her as she followed the concierge across the pristine floor, her simple black dress and modest hijab marking her as someone who didn't belong in this rarefied world. The elevator ride to the penthouse level felt endless. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a private hallway with only one door, a massive mahogany barrier that seemed to guard secrets beyond its threshold. The concierge knocked once, waited, then used a key card to open the door. "Miss Osman has arrived, sir," he announced before retreating back to the elevator with a respectful bow. Safiya stepped into a space that redefined her understanding of luxury. The suite was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Cape Town's glittering skyline and the dark ocean beyond. Original artworks adorned the walls, and fresh orchids perfumed the air. But despite all the opulence, something felt hollow about the space, as if all this beauty was just an elaborate mask covering something broken underneath. Khalil emerged from what appeared to be a study, and Safiya was struck by how different he looked in this environment. Gone was the commanding presence from the wellness center. Here, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing to him, he appeared smaller, more vulnerable. He had changed from his business suit into simple dark pants and a white shirt, the casual clothes somehow making him seem more human. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been there before. "I wasn't sure you would." "I keep my promises," Safiya replied, then immediately wondered why she had said it. This wasn't a promise, it was a business transaction, wasn't it? Khalil gestured toward the living area, where two chairs faced each other near the massive windows. A small table between them held a silver tea service and a manila envelope that Safiya suspected contained the first half of her payment. But her eyes were drawn to something else, a child's drawing taped to the window, so out of place in this sophisticated setting that it took her breath away. Following her gaze, Khalil's expression softened. Layla drew that during one of her last hospital stays. She said the bird was flying to find its family in Somalia. When I told her you were from Somalia, she became convinced that you and the bird were connected somehow. Safiya approached the window slowly, studying the simple crayon drawing of a colorful bird against a blue sky. The strokes were unsteady, clearly made by a sick child, but there was something hopeful about the image that made her chest tighten. "She talked about you often after you started treating her," Khalil continued. "Not just about the massages, but about the stories you told her. She said you painted pictures with words about a place where the ocean was so blue it looked like pieces of sky had fallen to earth." "The beach is near Mogadishu," Safiya whispered. "I used to swim there with my brothers when I was her age. She made me promise to visit Somalia someday, to see if the water really was that blue." Khalil's voice cracked slightly. "I've been too. Every continent, built business relationships in 50 countries, but I never thought to take my daughter to see the places that lived in her imagination." Safiya turned from the window to study his face. "You blame yourself." It wasn't a question, and Khalil didn't treat it as one. "I gave her everything money could buy: the best doctors, private hospital rooms, experimental treatments. But I never gave her a normal childhood. I never took her to see blue water or let her feed birds in the park because I was always chasing the next deal, the next acquisition." "She never blamed you," Safiya said with quiet certainty. "Children don't think like that." "She talked about you during our sessions, how proud she was that her papa could build buildings that touched the sky, how she wanted to be strong like you." Khalil's composure cracked. He sat down heavily in one of the chairs, burying his face in his hands. "She was stronger than me. Even at the end, when the pain was unbearable, she would comfort me. An 8-year-old girl consoling her father because she could see he was falling apart. Safiya moved to the chair across from him, her healer's instincts overriding her nervousness about the situation. Tell me about her last day. I can't. The words came out muffled through his hands. Every time I try to remember, I see only the machines, the tubes, the way her little body looked so lost in that hospital bed. I can't remember her smile or her laugh anymore. The disease stole that from me too. Then let me help you find those memories again. Khalil looked up, his eyes red with unshed tears. How? Safiya opened her bag and began removing her supplies, small bottles of essential oil, soft cotton towels, a portable speaker no bigger than her palm. Layla told me once that you used to read her stories before bed. What was her favorite? The Princess and the Seven Ravens. It's an old Arabic tale my grandmother told me when I was young. Layla loved the part where the princess transforms the ravens back into her brothers with pure love. Can you remember how you used to tell it? Your voice, the way you would change it for different characters? Khalil nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I would make the ravens sound very serious and important, like business executives. It always made her giggle. Close your eyes, Safiya instructed gently. I'm going to work on releasing the tension you're carrying, and while I do, I want you to tell me that story the way you used to tell it to her. Don't think about the hospital or the ending. Just remember the joy of sharing something magical with your daughter. She moved behind his chair and placed her hands lightly on his shoulders. The tension was extraordinary. His muscles felt like cables stretched to their breaking point. But as she began to work, applying gentle pressure and letting the warmth of her touch convey safety, she felt him begin to soften. Once upon a time, Khalil began hesitantly, there was a king who had 7 sons and 1 daughter. As his voice gained strength, taking on the different tones and inflections he had once used to delight a sick little girl, something magical happened in that opulent hotel suite. The space seemed to fill with the presence of a child who had loved stories and blue water and birds that represented freedom. Safiya could feel Khalil's memories returning, not the painful ones from the hospital, but the beautiful ones from before, when his daughter's laughter had been the most precious sound in his world. But as her hands worked deeper into the knots of grief and guilt he carried, Safiya began to sense something else. Hidden beneath the father's anguish was another layer of pain, older and more complex. There were secrets here that went beyond a parent's love for his lost child. Secrets that would explain why a billionaire CEO had risked everything to find a refugee massage therapist in a small Cape Town wellness center. Khalil's story wound toward its fairy tale ending. Safiya realized that their own story was just beginning, and the truth waiting to be uncovered would challenge everything she thought she understood about love, sacrifice, and the lengths people will go to seek redemption for the choices that haunt them. The first part of the night had given Khalil what he came for, a return to beautiful memories of his daughter. But Safiya was beginning to understand that this was only the surface of why he had really sought her out. The deeper truth would require her to venture into territory that had nothing to do with healing techniques and everything to do with the courage to face uncomfortable revelations about the man whose burden she was now sharing. Outside the windows of the Mount Nelson Hotel, Cape Town sparkled like scattered diamonds against black velvet. But inside the suite, 2 people sat suspended in a moment of fragile peace that would soon give way to discoveries that would change both their lives forever. 2 hours had passed since Safiya began working on Khalil's shoulders, and the transformation was remarkable. The rigid businessman who had entered the wellness center that afternoon had given way to someone more vulnerable, more human. His breathing had deepened, and for the first time since his daughter's death, sleep seemed like a possibility rather than a torment. But as Safiya's hands moved along the planes of his back, she encountered something that made her pause. Beneath his left shoulder blade, her fingertips found raised skin, the unmistakable texture of old scar tissue. Not the kind from surgery or accident, but something more deliberate, more violent. "You're tense here," she observed quietly, applying gentle pressure to the area. Khalil's entire body stiffened. "It's an old injury. This isn't from an injury." Her voice remained professionally neutral, but her training had taught her to read the stories bodies told. "This is from a burn, deliberate." The silence that followed stretched until it became uncomfortable. Khalil shifted forward, pulling away from her touch. When he turned to face her, his expression had changed completely, the vulnerability replaced by something harder, more guarded. "You're very perceptive," he said, reaching for his shirt. "It's my job to notice these things." Safiya remained calm, but internally she was recalibrating. This wasn't just a grieving father seeking comfort. There were layers here she hadn't expected. "Would you like to tell me about it?" Khalil stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. "Some stories are better left buried. In my experience, buried stories have a way of surfacing when we least expect them." Safiya began packing her oils, giving him space but not retreating entirely. "They show up as insomnia, chronic pain, nightmares. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget." "You sound like you speak from experience." "I do." She met his gaze directly. "I have scars too, Mr. Al-Mansouri, different kinds, but scars nonetheless." Something in her tone seemed to reach him. He turned from the window, and she could see him weighing his words carefully. "The burn happened 22 years ago," he said finally. "I was 19, idealistic, and incredibly stupid." Safiya settled back into her chair, sensing that he needed to tell this story as much as she needed to hear it. "I was a university student in London then, studying engineering. My father had built Mansouri Energy from nothing, and the expectation was that I would join the company after graduation, help expand our operations." Khalil's voice took on a distant quality, as if he were narrating someone else's life. "But I had other ideas. I wanted to use my education to help people, not just make money." "What changed?" "I fell in love." The admission came out quietly, almost ashamed. Her name was Amara. She was studying medicine, planned to return to her village in Sudan to provide healthcare where none existed. She was everything I wasn't: selfless, brave, completely unconcerned with wealth or status. Safiya felt a chill of recognition. She was African. Yes, and in my father's world, that made her completely unacceptable. Khalil's hands clenched at his sides. "When he found out about our relationship, he gave me an ultimatum: end it immediately or be cut off from the family entirely. But you chose her. I chose love, or at least I thought I did." His laugh was bitter. "I was so naive. I thought love could conquer everything: family pressure, cultural differences, the disapproval of two different worlds that had never been meant to intersect." Safiya waited, understanding that this story was building towards something significant. "Amara and I eloped. We had a small ceremony in a London registry office, no family from either side. We planned to finish our degrees, then move to Sudan. Together, I would use my engineering skills to help build infrastructure in remote areas. She would provide medical care. It was a beautiful dream. What happened?" Khalil closed his eyes. "My father happened. He couldn't accept that his heir had married beneath his station, as he put it. So he took action to correct what he saw as a catastrophic mistake." The room felt colder suddenly. Safiya could sense the approach of something terrible. "He hired people to investigate Amara's background, looking for anything he could use to discredit her or force us apart. What he found was worse than anything he had hoped for." Khalil's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Amara's younger brother, Hassan, was involved with a group fighting the Sudanese government. Nothing violent. They were advocating for medical supplies to reach isolated villages. But in my father's hands, this information became something much more sinister. He used it against her." He contacted Sudanese authorities and implied that Amara was connected to terrorist activities. In Sudan in 2001, such accusations were essentially death sentences. Khalil turned back to the window, unable to meet Safiya's eyes. She was arrested 3 days after we returned to Khartoum for her brother's wedding. I never saw her again. The weight of this revelation settled over Safiya like a heavy blanket. The scar on your back was my father's way of ensuring I never forgot the lesson. He had me held down while one of his associates applied a heated metal brand, the family crest. He said it was to remind me that blood loyalty comes before everything else, including love. Safiya felt sick. How old did you say you were? 19. Old enough to know better, according to him. Young enough to be taught a permanent lesson. And Amara? Died in custody 6 months later. Officially, it was a heart condition. Unofficially, ... He left the sentence hanging. Safiya stood slowly, her mind reeling. Why are you telling me this? Khalil turned to face her, and she could see tears streaming down his cheeks. Because you need to understand what kind of man I am before you decide whether to help me with what I really need. This isn't about grief therapy for your daughter. No, I mean it is partly. Layla's death broke something in me that was already cracked. But there's more. He moved to a desk in the corner and retrieved a thick folder. I've spent the last 20 years building a fortune, becoming powerful enough to challenge my father. And now that he's dead, I'm finally in a position to make amends for what I allowed to happen. He handed her the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, legal papers, all related to what appeared to be a massive humanitarian project in Sudan. I'm building a medical complex in Amara's village, Khalil explained. A hospital, training facilities, housing for medical staff. I want to hire doctors and nurses from across Africa to provide the kind of care she dreamed of offering. Safiya flipped through the documents, impressed despite herself by the scope and thoughtfulness of the project. This is incredible work, but why do you need me? Because I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands both worlds, African and Arab, someone who has survived trauma and chosen healing over bitterness, someone who knew how to comfort my daughter when I couldn't. You want me to help run this project? I want you to lead it. The words hung in the air between them. The $1 million isn't payment for tonight. It's the signing bonus for a job offer. Safiya stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. You're offering me a job running a medical complex in Sudan? I'm offering you the chance to continue Amara's work, to honor Layla's memory, and to help heal a part of the world that has known too much suffering. Khalil's voice was steady now, purposeful. I've watched you work, talk to people at the hospital where you volunteer. You have the skills, the compassion, and the cultural understanding to make this succeed. I'm not qualified to run something like this. I'm a massage therapist, not a healthcare administrator. Amara was just a medical student when she dreamed of changing the world, but she had the vision and the heart. You have those same qualities. Khalil returned to his chair, leaning forward earnestly. I'll provide all the resources, training, and support you need. But I need someone who cares. More about healing than profit. Someone who won't let bureaucracy get in the way of helping people. Safiya felt overwhelmed. This conversation had taken a turn she never could have anticipated. Why not just donate the money to existing organizations? Because existing organizations are bound by politics, regulations, and competing interests. This needs to be different, run by people who understand what it means to lose everything and start over. Khalil paused. Like you did when you came to South Africa. Like Amara would have done if she'd lived. The folder felt heavy in Safiya's hands. Inside were architectural plans, budget projections, and lists of medical equipment that would serve thousands of people. It was the kind of opportunity that could transform not just her life, but countless others. There's something else, Khalil. sighed quietly. Something I haven't told you about why I really sought you out. Safiya looked up from the documents, sensing that the biggest revelation was still to come. When I was researching the hospital where you volunteer, I discovered something in Layla's medical records. A note from one of the nurses about a conversation she had with you. He pulled out a small piece of paper. Do you remember telling Layla about your brother Hassan? The name hit Safiya like a physical blow. She had indeed told Layla about her brother, the same Hassan who had died fighting for medical access in Sudan. The same Hassan whose activism had been used to destroy an innocent woman named Amara. My Hassan wasn't involved in politics, Safiya whispered. He was a medical student. He was trying to get supplies to refugee camps. Khalil nodded slowly. The same Hassan who was Amara's brother. The same young man whose activities my father used to justify her arrest. The folder slipped from Safiya's numb fingers, papers scattering across the expensive carpet. That's impossible. I thought so too, until I saw the dates, the locations, the medical school records. Hassan Osman and Hassan Mully were the same person. Amara was using her mother's maiden name to protect her family when she moved to London. Khalil's voice was gentle but inexorable. Safiya, Amara wasn't just a woman I loved and lost. She was your sister-in-law. Hassan's death in the refugee camp wasn't random violence. It was retaliation for his sister's marriage to me. The room spun around Safiya as the implications crashed into her consciousness. Her brother's death, her family's flight from Sudan, her own journey to South Africa, all of it connected to this man sitting across from her. All of it the result of a love story that had ended in tragedy 20 years before she even knew it existed. But even as her mind reeled from this revelation, she sensed that there were still deeper layers to uncover. The night was far from over, and the most shocking truths were yet to come. Safiya's legs gave out, and she collapsed back into her chair as the full magnitude of Khalil's revelation crashed over her like a tsunami. The elegant hotel suite seemed to dissolve around her, replaced by memories she had buried deep. Her brother Hassan's excited voice on their last phone call, describing the medical student he was going to marry. A girl named Amara who shared his dream of bringing healthcare to forgotten corners of Sudan. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. Hassan never married. He died before. They had a ceremony in London, but they never had time to register it officially in Sudan. Khalil said gently. By the time they returned for what was supposed to be a celebration with both families, my father had already set his plan in motion. Safiya's hands trembled as she tried to process this information. Hassan called me 3 days before he died. He was so happy, talking about bringing his new wife to meet our family. He said she was going to help him build a clinic at our village. That was Amara. Khalil's voice carried 20 years of guilt. She had already been arrested by then, but Hassan didn't know. My father's people made sure the news didn't reach him immediately. They wanted him to suffer the loss slowly, completely. You're telling me that my brother died thinking his wife had abandoned him? I'm telling you that your brother died because I was too weak to stand up to my father. Because I chose family loyalty over protecting the woman I loved and the people she cared about. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of Cape Town's nightlife filtering through the windows. Safiya stared at the scattered papers on the floor. Architectural plans for a medical complex that was supposed to honor the memory of the sister-in-law she had never known existed. How long have you known? She asked finally. I suspected when I first heard your story at the hospital. A massage therapist from Somalia who had lost family members in violence, who had come to South Africa as a refugee. There were too many coincidences. But I wasn't certain until I had my people investigate. Khalil reached into the folder and pulled out a faded photograph. This was in Hassan's belongings when he died. I think you'll recognize it. Safiya took the photograph with shaking hands. It showed a group of young people at what appeared to be a picnic or outdoor gathering. In the center, a young man who looked exactly like her brother Hassan had his arm around a beautiful woman with intelligent eyes and a radiant smile. Scattered around them were other faces she didn't recognize, except for one, a little girl. Perhaps 5 years old, sitting on Hassan's lap and grinning at the camera. "That's me," Safiya breathed. This was taken at Hassan's university graduation party. But this woman, ... is Amara. She was already studying in London by then, but she flew back to Sudan for Hassan's graduation. They had been secretly dating. For 2 years, Khalil's voice was carefully controlled. I have copies of their correspondence, Safiya. Hundreds of letters where Hassan wrote about his brilliant little sister who was going to be a healer, who could make anyone feel better just by touching them. Safiya pressed the photograph to her chest, overwhelmed by the collision of past and present. He used to practice his English by writing letters to his girlfriend. I helped him with the grammar. I never knew. You helped him write love letters. To my wife, the weight of interconnection was staggering. Every thread of their lives had been woven together long before either of them realized it, creating a tapestry of loss and missed connections that spanned 2 decades. "Why didn't you tell me this at the wellness center?" Safiya demanded, anger finally breaking through her shock. "Why the elaborate charade with Layla's memory and the $1 million offer?" "Because I needed you to know who I really was first. I needed you to understand that I'm not the same man who allowed his father to destroy your family." Khalil stood and began pacing, his own emotions finally showing cracks in his composed facade. "If I had approached you directly with the truth, you would have seen me as the enemy, which I am." "You're not." "I am," he interrupted forcefully. "My father's actions killed your brother and sister-in-law. My weakness, my inability to protect them, destroyed your family. I am directly responsible for the chain of events that made you a refugee, that took away your home, your security, everything you knew." Safiya studied his face, seeing the anguish there, but also recognizing something else. Desperate need for absolution that went far deeper than grief over his daughter's death. "Is that what this is really about?" she asked. Quietly, "The medical complex, the job offer, finding me through Layla, it's all about your guilt?" "Partly yes, but not only that." Khalil stopped pacing and faced her directly. "I've spent 20 years building power specifically for this moment. My father's empire became my empire. His contacts, his influence, his money, I took it all. And I've been waiting for the right opportunity to use it for something he would have hated. Helping Africans. Specifically, helping the people whose lives he destroyed in service of his prejudices." Khalil's eyes burned with intensity. "The medical complex in Sudan is just the beginning. I have plans for education initiatives, infrastructure projects, economic development programs, all focused on communities that have been marginalized or harmed by exactly the kind of thinking that killed Amara and Hassan." Safiya felt a strange mixture of admiration and suspicion. "That's a very noble way to spend blood money." "It is blood money," Khalil agreed without flinching. "Every dollar I made using my father's network, every connection I leveraged, every deal I closed, it's all tainted by what he did. The only way I can live with that is to use it for the opposite of what he intended. And you need me because ... Because I can't do it alone. I'm a wealthy Arab businessman. Exactly the kind of person these communities have learned to distrust. But you're someone who has lived their struggles, who understands their needs from the inside." Khalil sat back down, leaning forward earnestly. "More than that, you have something I don't, the ability to heal without causing more harm. I'm not qualified to run international humanitarian projects. Neither was Hassan when he started advocating for medical supplies. Neither was Amara when she dreamed of transforming healthcare in rural Sudan. But they had the vision and the heart." Khalil gestured toward the scattered papers. "I can provide the money, the connections, the logistical support. What I need is someone who cares more about the mission than the power." Safiya looked again at the photograph in her hands, seeing her brother's face shining with happiness and hope. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Come to Sudan with me. See the site where the medical complex will be built. It's only 50 kilometers from where Hassan grew up. Meet the local leaders, the health workers, the families who will benefit. If you decide the project is worthwhile, then consider taking a leadership role. And if I decide it's just an elaborate way for you to buy forgiveness, then you walk away, and I'll find another way to honor their memory." Khalil's voice was steady. "But I don't think that's what you'll find." Safiya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that seemed to mirror the confusion in her mind. Everything she thought she knew about her life had been rewritten in the space of a few hours. Her brother's death wasn't just a random tragedy, it was connected to a love story that had ended in persecution and murder. The massage therapist from Cape Town wasn't just a refugee success story. She was the surviving sister of a man whose vision for healing could still change the world. "There's something else," she said without turning around. "Something you haven't told me yet." Khalil was quiet for so long that she finally looked back at him. His face had gone pale. "How did you know?" "Because I've been reading people's bodies for years, and yours is holding more tension than guilt and grief can account for." Safiya moved closer, her healer's instincts overriding her emotional turmoil. "There's fear here, recent fear." "What? Aren't you telling me about why this has to happen now?" Khalil closed his eyes and was silent for a long moment. When he opened them again, Safiya saw something that made her blood run cold, the look of a man who was running out of time. "My father had enemies, powerful people who disagreed with his methods, who wanted revenge for the things he did in building his empire." Khalil's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Some of those people have recently discovered that I'm using his money to fund projects they see as betrayals of Arab interests. You're in danger. We're in danger. The moment you agree to work with me, you become a target too." Khalil stood slowly. "There have been threats, Safiya. Specific, credible threats against anyone involved in my humanitarian work. 3 weeks ago, someone broke into my London office and left a message. Your father's lessons weren't enough. Time for permanent education." The room felt suddenly cold. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I needed you to make the choice based on the mission, not on fear. But you deserve to know what you're walking into if you say yes." Safiya stared at him, understanding finally why a billionaire had been willing to risk everything to find a refugee massage therapist in Cape Town. This wasn't just about redemption or healing. It was about finishing something that had started 20 years ago, something that powerful people were willing to kill to prevent. But as she looked at her brother's photograph one more time, seeing his face bright with dreams that had been cut short by hatred and fear, Safiya realized that the choice had already been made. Some things were worth the risk. The question was whether she was brave enough to honor her brother's memory by walking into the same danger that had killed him. The pre-dawn darkness over Cape Town was broken only by the distant glow of streetlights and the faint outline of Table Mountain against the star-filled sky. Safiya hadn't slept. She had spent the remaining hours of the night in her small observatory flat, staring at the photograph of Hassan and Amara while wrestling with a decision that would either fulfill her brother's dreams or get her killed trying. The manila envelope containing the first half of Khalil's payment sat unopened on her kitchen table, as if touching the money would somehow make her choice irrevocable. But the choice had already been made, really. It had been made the moment she saw Hassan's face shining with love and hope in that faded photograph. Her phone buzzed at exactly 5:30 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "The car will arrive at 6 o'clock. Bring only essentials. We leave for Sudan immediately." Safiya stared at the message. She hadn't even told him her decision yet, but somehow Khalil already knew what it would be. Perhaps you recognized the same stubborn determination in her that had driven Hassan to risk everything for his beliefs. She moved through her flat methodically, packing a single backpack with clothes, her massage oils, and a few precious belongings that had survived her journey from Somalia. Her neighbors were still asleep, unaware that the quiet woman next door was about to disappear into a world of international conspiracies and inherited vengeance. As she sealed Hassan's photograph inside a waterproof pouch and tucked it into her bag, Safiya allowed herself one moment of doubt. Was she honoring her brother's memory, or simply walking into the same trap that had killed him? Was Khalil truly seeking redemption, or was this an elaborate manipulation designed to serve his own psychological needs? The black Mercedes arrived precisely on schedule, but this time Khalil himself was behind the wheel. He looked different. In the morning light, older, more careworn, but also more determined. When Safiya climbed into the passenger seat, he studied her face carefully. "You could still change your mind," he said quietly. "Once we board the plane, there's no going back." "Hassan never had the chance to change his mind," Safiya replied. "Neither did Amara. Why should I get what they were denied?" Khalil nodded, slowly, understanding passing between them. "The flight to Khartoum is 8 hours. I've arranged for us to use my private jet. It's more secure than commercial travel, and we can talk freely." As they drove through the empty streets toward the airport, Safiya found herself studying this man who had become the unlikely architect of her future. "Tell me about the threats." "Specifically, my father built his empire by making deals with unsavory people, arms dealers, corrupt politicians, extremist financiers. He justified it by saying business was separate from politics, but that was never true." Khalil's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "When those same people learned I was funding medical facilities and education programs for African communities, they saw it as a betrayal of the natural order." "Meaning?" "Meaning they believe wealth should flow from Africa to the Middle East, not the other way around. They see my humanitarian work as funding potential enemies, strengthening communities that should remain weak and dependent." Safiya felt a chill of recognition. "The same logic your father used to justify destroying Hassan and Amara." "Exactly. And some of my father's old associates have decided that I need to be stopped before I can do more damage to their interests." They reached the private aviation terminal as the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Khalil's jet was smaller than Safiya had expected, elegant, but not ostentatious. Designed for efficiency rather than display. As they boarded, Khalil introduced her to his security team. Marcus, a former South African Special Forces operative, who would be accompanying them to Sudan, and Dr. Sarah Chun, a Taiwanese-American physician who had been working with Khalil for 3 years to design the medical complex. "Dr. Chun will brief you on the project specifics during the flight," Khalil explained as they settled into the comfortable cabin. "She's been to the site multiple times and knows the local health challenges better than anyone." Once they were airborne, Dr. Chun opened a laptop and began showing Safiya detailed plans that were far more sophisticated than anything she had imagined. The medical complex wasn't just a hospital, it was a comprehensive healthcare ecosystem designed to serve a region with over 200,000 people. "The main hospital will have 150 beds, including a dedicated pediatric wing and maternity ward," Dr. Chun explained, her enthusiasm infectious. "But that's only the beginning. We're also building satellite clinics in 12 surrounding villages, training facilities for local health workers, and mobile units for reaching the most remote areas." Safiya studied the architectural renderings, impressed by the thoughtful design. Solar panels would provide renewable energy, rainwater collection systems would ensure water security, and local materials were being used wherever possible to create jobs and reduce environmental impact. "What's the total cost?" she asked. "Phase 1 is $47 million, Dr. Chun replied matter-of-factly. But the economic impact for the region will be enormous. We're creating over 300 permanent jobs and training opportunities for thousands more. And how many people like this? Safiya gestured toward Marcus, who was quietly monitoring communications equipment at the back of the plane. Marcus is the only security we're bringing openly, Khalil answered. But we have local contacts who will provide additional protection if needed. Local contacts? Community leaders who knew Hassan and Amara. People who have been waiting 20 years for someone to honor their memory properly. Khalil pulled out a tablet and showed her photographs of a group of men and women in traditional Sudanese dress. Hassan's medical school classmates who became doctors and nurses despite the obstacles. Village elders who remember Amara's plans for community health programs. They've been developing this project with me for 2 years. Safiya felt her throat tighten. They know who I am. They know you're Hassan's sister. They know you've spent your life healing people, just like he wanted to do. To them, you're not just part of this project. You're the living continuation of everything Hassan and Amara believed in. The weight of expectation was enormous, but also strangely comforting. For the first time since leaving Somalia, Safiya felt connected to something larger than her own survival. As the plane crossed over the African continent, Dr. Chun showed her videos from recent visits to the construction site. Safiya watched earth-moving equipment carving foundations from red earth, local workers mixing concrete under the blazing sun, children from nearby villages watching the progress with wide, curious eyes. Construction began 8 months ago, Dr. Chun explained. We're about 40% complete. If everything goes according to schedule, we'll be ready to open in 18 months. If there have been complications, equipment mysteriously breaking down, supply shipments being delayed or disappearing entirely, workers receiving threats. Dr. Chun's expression darkened. Last month, someone set fire to the temporary medical station we had established while construction continued. No one was hurt, but it sent a clear message. Khalil joined their conversation from across the aisle. The same people who are threatening me are also trying to sabotage the project directly. They can't attack us openly, without creating international incidents, but they can make life very difficult through local pressure. Which is why we need someone the community trusts, Dr. Chun added. Someone who represents continuity with Hassan and Amara's vision, not just another foreign do-gooder with good intentions. Safiya spent the next few hours reviewing detailed reports about the region's health challenges, maternal mortality rates that were among the highest in the world, childhood diseases that could be prevented with basic immunizations, chronic malnutrition that stunted both physical and cognitive development. The statistics were overwhelming, but they also clarified the urgency of the mission. Hassan would have been heartbroken by these numbers, she murmured, studying infant mortality data. He was, Khalil said quietly. I have letters he wrote to Amara describing his visits to rural clinics. He couldn't understand why children were dying from diseases that could be cured with medications that cost pennies. And Amara wanted to train local health workers so communities could provide their own care instead of depending on outside help, which is exactly what we're doing. The training programs will graduate 50 new health workers every year, all from local communities. Within a decade, this region will have some of the best healthcare infrastructure in Sudan. As afternoon faded toward evening, the plane began its descent toward Khartoum International Airport. Safiya pressed her face to the window, watching the Nile River snake through the desert landscape below. Somewhere down there was the village where Hassan had grown up, where he had first dreamed of becoming a healer. Are you ready for this? Khalil asked as they prepared for landing. Safiya touched the photograph in her bag, Hassan and Amara smiling together, unaware that their love story would end in tragedy, but somehow hoping that their dreams might still survive them. I think Hassan and Amara have been waiting 20 years for someone to finish what they started, she said. I'm ready to find out if I'm the right person for the job." As the plane touched down on Sudanese soil, Safiya felt the weight of history settling around her. She was returning to a country that had taken everything from her family, but she was returning with the power to transform that legacy of loss into something hopeful and healing. What she didn't know was that within hours of landing, she would discover that the threats against the project were far more immediate and dangerous than anyone had told her, and that her own life was already in more peril than she could possibly imagine. The heat hit Safiya like a physical wall. As she stepped off the plane at Khartoum International Airport, the familiar dry warmth of the Sudanese desert carried scents that immediately transported her back to childhood dust, acacia trees, and the faint smell of wood smoke from distant cooking fires. But overlaying these comforting memories was an undercurrent of tension that made her skin prickle with unease. Marcus was the first to notice something wrong. As they walked across the tarmac toward the terminal, his hand moved subtly to his jacket, and his eyes began scanning the airport workers and officials with heightened alertness. "We have a problem," he murmured to Khalil, his voice barely audible, over the sound of jet engines and ground equipment. "What kind of problem?" Khalil asked, maintaining his casual stride, but following Marcus's gaze toward a group of men in plain clothes, who were watching their approach with more interest than routine airport security would warrant. "The kind that usually involves people not making it to their destination," Marcus replied grimly. "We need to change our route to the hotel." Dr. Chun moved closer to Safiya, her earlier enthusiasm replaced by visible concern. "This isn't how our previous arrivals went. Something's different this time." As they entered the terminal, Safiya became aware of the subtle choreography of surveillance unfolding around them. Men in business suits who seemed to have no luggage, women with sunglasses despite being indoors, airport employees who kept glancing in their direction while pretending to work. The feeling of being watched was so intense it made her chest tight with anxiety. The passport control officer who processed their documents spent far longer than necessary studying each passport, making quiet phone calls between each approval. When he handed Safiya's documents back to her, his eyes held a warning that chilled her blood. "Welcome home, Miss Osman," he said in Arabic, his voice carrying layers of meaning. "I hope your stay will be peaceful." Marcus immediately guided them toward a different exit than originally planned, speaking rapidly into a small radio device. "We're compromised. Need alternate transport en route immediately." Instead of the comfortable SUV that was supposed to meet them, they found themselves being hustled into a battered taxi driven by a young man who spoke to Khalil in rapid, urgent Arabic. Safiya caught enough of the conversation to understand that their original hotel reservation had been discovered by unfriendly parties, and they were being taken to a safe house instead. "What's happening?" she asked as the taxi pulled away from the airport at a speed that suggested genuine urgency. "Word of our arrival reached the wrong people," Khalil explained, his composure finally showing cracks. "We may have underestimated how closely we're being monitored." The drive through Khartoum's bustling streets became a masterclass in evasive driving. Their taxi driver, who Dr. Chun quietly identified as one of Hassan's former medical school classmates, took a circuitous route through narrow alleyways and crowded markets, stopping occasionally to let Marcus check whether they were being followed. Safiya found herself studying the city that had been the backdrop for so much of her family's tragedy. Khartoum had changed significantly since her childhood visits, but the fundamental character remained the same, a sprawling metropolis where ancient traditions collided with modern aspirations, where wealth and poverty existed in jarring proximity. "There," Dr. Chun pointed out the window toward a modern hospital complex. "That's where Hassan completed his residency. 3 of the doctors working there now are part of our project. Are they safe?" Safiya asked, suddenly concerned about the people who had been working with Khalil for years. "For now," But if our cover is blown, everyone associated with the project becomes a target. Khalil's voice was grim. That's why we need to reach the construction site as quickly as possible. Once we're in the village, we'll have community protection. The safe house turned out to be a modest compound in an older residential district, surrounded by high walls and guarded by men who clearly weren't ordinary security personnel. As their taxi pulled through the gates, Safiya noticed the guards' automatic weapons and tactical equipment. This wasn't just protection, it was preparation for war. Inside the compound, they were met by Dr. Fatima Al-Bashir, a woman in her 50s, whose intelligent eyes and authoritative bearing immediately commanded respect. She embraced Khalil warmly, then turned to study Safiya with undisguised curiosity. "So you are Hassan's sister," she said in accented English. "He spoke of you often during medical school. Said you had healing hands even as a child. You knew." "My brother, we were study partners for 2 years. I was also there the night he met Amara." Dr. Al-Bashir's expression grew solemn. "And I was one of the last people to see him alive." The weight of that statement settled over the group like a shroud. Safiya felt her throat constrict as she realized she was standing with someone who had witnessed the final chapter of Hassan's story. What happened to him? "Really?" she asked, needing to know the truth her family had never been told. Dr. Al-Bashir glanced at Khalil, who nodded slightly. Hassan was arrested 3 days after Amara disappeared. The charges were supporting terrorist activities, but everyone knew it was political. He was held in Cobra prison for 6 weeks. "We tried to get him released," Khalil added quietly. "I hired lawyers, contacted officials, even offered bribes. But my father's influence was too strong. Hassan died during what was officially called an attempted escape," Dr. Al-Bashir continued, her voice carefully controlled. "But prisoners who were there said he was beaten to death for refusing to denounce Amara publicly." Safiya closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the image of her gentle brother dying for love and principle. He never would have denounced her. No, even when they told him it would save his life, he refused to say she was a terrorist. He died protecting her memory. Dr. Al-Bashir reached out and took Safiya's hands. "That's why this project matters so much to those of us who knew them. It's not just about building hospitals, it's about proving that their beliefs were worth dying for." Marcus interrupted the emotional moment with urgent efficiency. "We need to leave for the village within the hour. My contacts report unusual activity around the construction site, vehicles that don't belong. Strangers asking questions about the project timeline." "What kind of strangers?" Dr. Chun asked. "The kind who carry military-grade equipment and have no interest in medical care," Marcus replied grimly. Dr. Al-Bashir moved to a wall map marked with various locations. "There are 3 routes to the village. The main road is fastest but most vulnerable. The desert route is longer but harder too. Monitor. The river route uses back roads but requires crossing 2 bridges that could easily be blocked. What do you recommend?" Khalil asked. "None of them," Dr. Al-Bashir said bluntly. "I recommend waiting until we can arrange better security." "We can't." "Wait," Safiya said, surprising everyone including herself. "If people are threatening the project, then the community needs to see that we're not intimidated. Hassan and Amara didn't hide when things got dangerous." Marcus studied her with new respect. "That's brave talk, but bravery doesn't stop bullets." "Neither does hiding," Safiya replied. "How long have these threats been escalating?" 6 months, Dr. Chun admitted. "Ever since we announced the project publicly." "And in those 6 months, how many times have you delayed or canceled visits because of security concerns?" Khalil and Dr. Chun exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Several times," Khalil acknowledged. "Then the threats are working. The people who killed Hassan and Amara are winning again." Safiya felt a surge of determination that reminded her powerfully of her brother's stubborn idealism. We go to the village today, or we might as well abandon the project entirely. Dr. Al-Bashir smiled slowly. You are definitely Hassan's sister. He had the same inability to be practical when principles were involved. Is there any way to make the journey safer? Dr. Chun asked. Marcus consulted his radio again, speaking. Clipped phrases to unseen contacts. I can arrange for 2 escort vehicles, local militia, who support the project. And we can coordinate with the village security to have protection waiting for us. Village security? Safiya asked. Hassan's cousins and childhood friends, Dr. Al-Bashir explained. Men who have been waiting 20 years for the chance to honor his memory properly. They'll die before they let anything happen to you. The enormity of what she was walking into began to crystallize for Safiya. This wasn't just about building a hospital or fulfilling a humanitarian mission. She was stepping into the center of a blood feud that had been simmering for 2 decades, becoming the living symbol of everything Hassan and Amara had died trying to achieve. How long to the village? She asked. 3 hours by the desert route, Marcus replied. If we leave now, we'll arrive before dark, then we leave now. Safiya's voice carried a finality that surprised everyone. Whatever happens, happens. But Hassan's dream doesn't die because we were afraid. As the group prepared for departure, loading vehicles with supplies and checking communication equipment, Safiya found herself holding Hassan's photograph one more time. Looking at his young, hopeful face, she made a silent promise. Whatever dangers waited ahead, she would see his vision through to completion. But as their convoy pulled out of the compound and into the dusty streets of Khartoum, none of them knew that armed men were already positioned along their route, waiting for the perfect moment to ensure that Hassan's dream would die with his sister, just as it had died with him 20 years before. The desert road stretched ahead of them like a red ribbon across an endless landscape, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. And somewhere out there in the heat and dust, the ghosts of the past were about to collide with the hopes of the future in ways that would test everything Safiya believed about courage, healing, and the price of honoring the dead. The desert road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of cracked asphalt shimmering in the afternoon heat. Safiya sat in the middle vehicle of their 3-car convoy, wedged between Dr. Chun and a local militia member whose AK-47 rested casually across his knees. The normalcy of traveling with armed guards spoke volumes about the reality they had. Entered. Marcus's voice crackled through the radio every few minutes, coordinating with the lead and trailing vehicles. The chatter was mostly in Arabic, but Safiya caught enough fragments to understand they were reporting clear road conditions and maintaining visual contact with each other. How much farther? Dr. Chun asked, checking her GPS device for the dozenth time. 47 kilometers, replied their driver, a weathered man named Yusuf who had introduced himself as Hassan's second cousin. We'll reach the village before sunset if Allah wills it. The landscape around them was harsh but beautiful. In its own way, endless expanses of red sand, punctuated by thorny acacia trees and occasional outcroppings of black rock. It was the kind of terrain that had shaped Hassan's childhood, teaching him resilience and appreciation for small mercies like shade and water. Hassan used to say this desert made him want to become a doctor, Yusuf said, glancing at Safiya in the rearview mirror. He said no one should die from thirst when there's a well 50 kilometers away, and no one should die from fever when there's medicine in the city. He always saw solutions where others saw only problems, Safiya replied, remembering her brothers. Infectious optimism. That's why we loved him. And why we mourn him still. Yusuf's voice carried the weight of 20 years of grief. Your brother's death changed our village forever. Before Hassan, we accepted that children died young, that women died in childbirth, that the old suffered in silence. After Hassan, we knew these things could be changed. The radio suddenly erupted in urgent Arabic. Marcus's voice, usually calm and controlled, carried an edge of alarm that made everyone in the vehicle tense immediately. "What's happening?" Dr. Chun demanded. Yusuf was already reaching for his own radio, speaking rapidly with the other vehicles. Safiya caught the words for roadblock and not official before Yusuf began slowing their vehicle. "There's an unscheduled checkpoint ahead," he translated grimly. "Marcus says the vehicles and uniforms don't match any legitimate security forces." Through the windshield, Safiya could see the lead vehicle approaching a barrier of oil drums and wooden planks stretched across the road. Men in mismatched military clothing were positioning themselves on both sides of the highway, their weapons clearly visible. "Can we turn around?" Dr. Chun asked. "Too late," the militia member beside Safiya said quietly. "They've seen us." Marcus's voice came through the radio again, this time in English for everyone's benefit. "This is definitely hostile. Prepare for evasive action on my signal." Safiya felt her heart racing as she watched the scene unfold ahead of them. The lead vehicle was being waved to a stop by armed men whose body language suggested this was not a routine inspection. She could see Khalil in the passenger seat, his profile tense but controlled. "There," Yusuf pointed to the left side of the road. "If we need to escape, we go through that gap in the rocks. It leads to an old smuggler's route that connects to the main road 5 kilometers past the village." "How do you know about smugglers' routes?" Dr. Chun asked nervously. Yusuf grinned without humor. "How do you think medical supplies reached our village during the worst years? Hassan wasn't the only one willing to break unjust laws to help people." The radio crackled again. "They're demanding to search our vehicles, looking specifically for the woman." Marcus's voice was tight with controlled anger. "This is targeted." Safiya felt a cold shock of realization. "They're here for me." "We're not giving you to them," the militia member said firmly, checking his weapon. "Hassan's sister goes home safely, or none of us go home at all." The next few minutes unfolded with terrifying speed. The men at the roadblock began moving toward their convoy with obvious hostile intent. Marcus's voice came through the radio. "One final time. Go, go, go." Yusuf floored the accelerator, swinging their vehicle off the road and toward the gap in the rocks he had identified. The terrain was rough, but their modified Land Cruiser handled it better than the pursuing vehicles. Behind them, Safiya could hear the sharp crack of automatic weapons fire. "Keep your heads down," Yusuf shouted as bullets shattered their rear window. Dr. Chun was praying in what sounded like Mandarin while gripping Safiya's arm with white-knuckled intensity. The militia member had turned in his seat and was returning fire through the broken window, his AK-47 adding to the deadly percussion echoing across the desert. "Where are the other vehicles?" Safiya called over the noise. "The trailing car is following us," Yusuf replied, fighting to control their bucking vehicle as it crashed through scrub brush and over rocks. "The lead car?" "I don't know." They crested a small hill, and suddenly the landscape opened up before them. In the distance, perhaps 10 kilometers away, Safiya could see a cluster of buildings that had to be the village. Between them and safety lay open desert that offered no cover from pursuit. "Can we make it?" Dr. Chun asked. "We have to," Yusuf said grimly. "The alternative is unacceptable." As they raced across the desert, kicking up a plume of dust that would be visible for kilometers, Safiya found herself thinking about Hassan and Amara. Had they felt this same mixture of terror and determination during their final days? Had they known they were going to die, or had they believed right up until the end that love and hope could overcome hatred and violence? The village grew larger as they approached, and Safiya could see people emerging from buildings to watch their dramatic arrival. Armed men were taking positions around the perimeter, the village security that Dr. al-Bashir had promised. "There." Dr. Chun pointed ahead. "The lead vehicle." Khalil's Land Cruiser was parked in the village center, apparently having taken a different route to safety. Safiya could see him standing beside it, scanning the horizon for their arrival. Even from a distance, his relief was palpable when he spotted their vehicle approaching. They skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust and flying gravel. Villagers surrounded them immediately, men, women, and children whose faces showed a mixture of concern and fierce protection. Safiya stumbled out of the vehicle, her legs shaky from adrenaline, and found herself face to face with an elderly man whose weathered features were hauntingly familiar. "You have Hassan's eyes," he said in Arabic, reaching out to touch her face. Gently, "I am Abu Hassan, his grandfather's brother. Welcome home, child." The simple words broke something loose in Safiya's chest. After years of being a refugee, a stranger, someone who belonged nowhere, she was suddenly surrounded by people who saw her as family. The violence of the last hour faded as she was embraced by what felt like an entire village. Khalil approached, his face showing strain but determination. "Are you hurt?" "No, but what about Marcus and the others?" "Marcus took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll be fine. The militiamen from the trailing car are all accounted for." Khalil's expression darkened. "But this changes everything. They're not just making threats anymore. They're willing to kill to stop us." Abu Hassan interrupted their conversation with quiet authority. "You are safe here. This village has protected Hassan's memory for 20 years. We will protect Hassan's sister for as long as necessary." "But the project," Dr. Chun began. "The project continues," Abu Hassan said firmly. "In fact, it becomes more urgent. The men who attacked you today are the same kind of men who killed Hassan and Amara. The best way to honor their memory is to prove that their dreams cannot be killed with bullets." As if to emphasize his point, he gestured toward the construction site visible on the far side of the village. Even in the fading daylight, Safiya could see the partially completed hospital rising from the desert like a concrete promise. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and the skeletal framework of what would become the pediatric wing stretched toward the sky. "Hassan's hospital," Abu Hassan said with quiet pride. "Every day we work on it, every day it grows larger, is another day. We defeat those who would keep our children sick and our women dying in childbirth." Safiya stared at the construction site, overwhelmed by the reality of what Hassan and Amara had set in motion. This wasn't just about building a medical facility. It was about transforming an entire community's relationship with health, education, and hope. "I want to see it," she said suddenly. "I want to see what my brother's dream looks like." Abu Hassan smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "Tomorrow, when the light is better, tonight you rest. Tonight, you let your family take care of you." As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Safiya found herself sitting in the courtyard of Abu Hassan's house, surrounded by cousins and distant relatives she had never met but who treated her like a beloved daughter returning from a long journey. Children brought her tea and dates, their curious eyes bright with intelligence that reminded her powerfully of Hassan at that age. Women shared stories of her brother's childhood, painting pictures of a boy who had always been determined to fix things that were broken, to heal things that were hurt. But even as she absorbed the warmth of this unexpected homecoming, Safiya knew that the violence of the afternoon was only the beginning. Someone was willing to kill to prevent Hassan's dream from becoming reality, and they wouldn't be deterred by one failed ambush. The question was whether she had the courage to stay and fight for something bigger than her own safety, or whether the smart thing to do was to disappear back into anonymity before the next attack came. As she looked up at the desert stars, the same stars Hassan had seen as a child dreaming of becoming a healer, Safiya realized that the choice had already been made. She was home, and she wasn't leaving until Hassan's hospital was complete and serving the people he had died trying to help. But first, she had to survive whatever was coming next. Dawn came early to the desert village, announced by the call to prayer echoing across the red sand landscape. Safiya woke on a simple cot in Abu Hassan's guest room, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous day came flooding back. Through the small window, she could see the construction site where Hassan's dream was slowly becoming reality. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sister Safiya? It was Layla, Abu Hassan's 12-year-old granddaughter, carrying a tray of tea and fresh bread. Grandfather says to come quickly. The Lebanese man needs to speak with you about something urgent. Safiya dressed quickly and found Khalil in the courtyard, his satellite phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in rapid, agitated Arabic. His face was pale, and she could see Marcus in the background, his arm in a makeshift sling, monitoring radio communications with obvious concern. What's happening? She asked Dr. Chun, who was studying architectural plans spread across a wooden table. We intercepted communications overnight, Dr. Chun replied grimly. The people who attacked us yesterday weren't just trying to stop the project. They were trying to kidnap you specifically. Why would they want to kidnap me? Khalil ended his phone call and approached them, his expression grave. Because you're not just Hassan's sister Safiya. You're also the key to something much bigger than any of us realized. Abu Hassan emerged from the house, carrying a metal strongbox that looked like it had survived several decades of desert storms. It's time she knew the complete truth, he said to Khalil. The danger is too great now for partial revelations. What truth? Safiya demanded, frustrated by the layers of secrecy that seemed to surround every aspect of this mission. Abu Hassan set the strongbox on the table and opened it with an old brass key. Inside were documents, photographs, and what appeared to be legal papers written in both Arabic and English. He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to Safiya. Your brother Hassan didn't just dream of building a medical clinic, Abu Hassan said quietly. He actually designed a comprehensive healthcare network for this entire region. Before he died, he created detailed plans, identified funding sources, and established legal frameworks for a project 10 times larger than what we're building here. Safiya opened the folder and found herself looking at Hassan's handwriting pages and pages of careful notes, diagrams and calculations. The scope was breathtaking. Not just one hospital, but a network of medical facilities connected by transportation. Systems, communication networks, and training programs that would serve over 500,000 people across 3 countries. This is incredible, she breathed. But why keep it secret? Because Hassan hid something else in these plans, Khalil said, his voice heavy with implications. Something that certain people have been searching for ever since he died. Abu Hassan pulled out another document, a map covered in Hassan's precise notations. Your brother was also an engineer, remember? While researching locations for medical facilities, he discovered something the government didn't want found. Safiya studied the map, trying to understand what she was seeing. These markers, what do they represent? Water, Dr. Chun said quietly. Hassan found one of the largest underground aquifer systems in North Africa. Enough fresh water to transform agriculture across the entire Sahel region. The implications hit Safiya like a physical blow. That's why they killed him. Not because of Amara, not because of politics, because of water rights worth billions of dollars, Khalil finished. Hassan's medical surveys were cover for geological research that could have changed the balance of power across 3 nations. And they think I know where the water sources are located, Safiya said, understanding finally why she had become a target. They think Hassan shared his discoveries with his family before he died, Abu Hassan confirmed. Which is why yesterday's attack was about kidnapping, not killing. They need you alive to reveal information you don't actually possess. Marcus approached the group, despite his wounded arm. Which means they'll keep coming. And next time, they'll bring more people. Safiya sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had stumbled into. I don't know anything about water sources or geological surveys. Hassan never told me about any of this. We know, Khalil said gently. But our enemies don't believe that. As long as they think you have Hassan's water maps, you'll be in danger. So what do? Abu Hassan smiled grimly. We give them what they want, just not in the way they expect. Over the next hour, the group outlined a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Hassan's geological surveys were real, and they had indeed identified significant water sources. But Hassan had hidden the real data and created false maps as insurance against exactly the kind of exploitation that had ultimately killed him. The authentic surveys are here, Dr. Chun explained, pointing to coordinates on Hassan's map. Locked in a safety deposit box in a Swiss bank, with instructions that they can only be released to a legitimate humanitarian organization working in Sudan. And the false maps? Safiya asked. Were hidden in various locations around the village, Abu Hassan said. Hassan told me where to find them before he left for London. He said if anything happened to him, these decoy maps should be used to protect his real discovery. The plan was elegantly simple. They would allow one of the false maps to be discovered by their enemies, sending them on a wild goose chase while the real water sources remained protected. Meanwhile, the medical complex would continue construction, eventually serving as the legitimate humanitarian organization that could legally access Hassan's true geological data. It's what Hassan always intended, Khalil explained. The hospital wasn't just about medical care. It was about creating an organization that could responsibly manage the water resources to benefit local communities rather than international corporations. But first, we have to survive long enough to make it work, Marcus added pragmatically. The next phase of the plan required Safiya to do something that terrified her, voluntarily enter a controlled situation where she could be captured by their enemies, plant the false map, and then be rescued by village security forces. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to convince their attackers that they had gotten what they came for. I can't ask you to do this, Khalil said. It's not what I brought you here for. Yes, it is, Safiya replied, looking at Hassan's photographs spread across the table. Maybe not consciously, but this is exactly what you brought me here for. To finish what Hassan started, to protect what he died trying to save. That afternoon, with the entire village mobilized in hidden support positions, Safiya walked alone toward the construction site, carrying a replica of Hassan's geological surveys. She felt exposed and vulnerable, but also strangely powerful. She was finally taking active control of the legacy that had shaped her entire life. The ambush came. Exactly as predicted. 3 vehicles surrounded her before she reached the hospital foundation. Men in unmarked military clothing detained her with professional efficiency, searching her belongings until they found the false geological survey hidden in her bag. For 20 terrifying minutes, Safiya endured interrogation in Arabic, while village marksmen remained hidden in positions around the construction site. Her captors were jubilant when they found Hassan's secret maps, convinced they had finally obtained the key to billions of dollars worth of water rights. The rescue, when it came, was swift and decisive. Village security forces had the kidnappers surrounded and disarmed before they realized they had walked into a trap. More importantly, they left convinced they had succeeded, carrying false information that would send them searching in entirely wrong locations while Hassan's real discoveries remained safely hidden. 3 months later, Safiya stood in the completed pediatric wing of Hassan Memorial Hospital, watching Dr. Chun train local medical students in advanced diagnostic techniques. The ambush had been the last serious attempt to stop the project. Once their enemies thought they had Hassan's water maps, they lost interest in the medical complex. Khalil found her there as the afternoon sun slanted through the hospital's solar-powered lighting system. His arm was around a young boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with bright, curious eyes and Hassan's distinctive smile. Safiya, I'd like you to meet someone, Khalil said. This is Omar Hassan's son. The world tilted on its axis. Hassan had a son? With a village girl named Nadia. Hassan never knew she was pregnant when he left for London, but didn't tell him because she didn't want to distract him from his studies. Khalil's voice was gentle. Omar has been living with Nadia's family. But when they heard about the hospital project, they thought he should meet his father's sister. Safiya knelt down to Omar's eye level, seeing Hassan's features reflected in this child who carried forward everything beautiful about her brother's legacy. Hello, Omar. Would you like to see the clinic where your papa wanted to help sick children? As she showed Omar through the hospital that bore his father's name, explaining the equipment and facilities that would serve his community for generations to come, Safiya finally understood what Khalil had really offered her that night in Cape Town. Not just money, not just a job, not even just redemption, but the chance to transform grief into hope, to turn a story of loss into a foundation for healing. The $1 million had never been payment for a single night of massage therapy. It had been an investment in something much more valuable, the continuation of a dream that was bigger than any individual life, stronger than hatred or violence, and more enduring than the people who had tried to destroy it. Outside Hassan Memorial Hospital, the desert stretched endlessly toward the horizon, harsh and beautiful and full of hidden possibilities. Somewhere beneath that red sand lay enough fresh water to transform an entire region. And someday, when Omar was old enough to understand his inheritance, he would help decide how that gift would be shared with the world. But for now, it was enough that Hassan's dream lived on in this place where healing hands could chase away darkness, where children could grow up healthy and strong, and where love proved stronger than the forces that tried to destroy it. Safiya had come to Sudan, seeking to honor her brother's memory. Instead, she had discovered that his memory was honoring her, giving her a purpose, a family, and a future that stretched far beyond anything she had dared to imagine that night when a mysterious billionaire first offered her $1 million for something that turned out to be worth infinitely more. In the end, the secret that shocked her wasn't about Khalil's past or his guilt, or even the dangerous conspiracy surrounding Hassan's discoveries. The secret was that some stories are bigger than the people who tell them, and some dreams refuse to die no matter how many people try to kill them. Hassan's dream was alive, growing stronger every day, carried forward by healing hands and the courage to hope for something better than the darkness that had come before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.